The story opens on a bleak, frozen wasteland littered with the remains of a massive army. Swords and spears are buried deep in the snow, marking the final resting place for countless soldiers who fell in this brutal war. Archman coughs up a spray of blood, his breath hitching as the cold air hits his lungs. He realizes instantly that the wound he's taken is fatal, and there's no coming back from this one. A hand tightly grips the holy sword of the Order. The blade is driven deep into Archman's chest, piercing straight through his heart. Standing behind the executioner, the remaining knights of the Order celebrate their hard-won victory. They cheer with relief, believing they've finally put an end to the terror that plagued the continent. To the people of this world, he was known as the demon of the continent, a man feared by nations and hunted by legends. His name was Archman, the most powerful and feared necromancer in history. He stands tall even as his life fades, blood staining his tattered black robes. Archman stares into the distance with a grim expression, fully aware that his time has run out. He accepts the reality of his impending death with a cold, quiet rage. The Great Continental War had dragged on for 10 grueling years. It was a desperate joint operation where elite forces infiltrated the lines while the main army acted as a vanguard. Archman had anticipated this move and built a defensive line to protect himself. Despite his preparations, the knights broke through, leaving his plan in tatters. It was a total, crushing defeat for the Necromancer. The battlefield is now nothing more than a graveyard of giant skulls and broken dreams. This entire turning point was caused by a single legendary knight who led the charge. Berkel Rhineland, the leader of the Northern Knights, walks forward through the snow. Berkel acknowledges the sacrifice of his men, knowing he didn't reach this point alone. His sword glows with a faint, holy light as he prepares to finish the job. The knight leader explains that only after countless people shed their blood was his sword able to finally reach Archman. He looks down at his foe with a mix of pity and stern resolve. Berkel tells him to give up now for the sake of peace on the continent. They stand on the frozen ice, two enemies at the end of their long struggle. Archman snaps, telling the knight to shut his mouth. He's tired of the self-righteous preaching while he's literally bleeding out. He accuses the knights of standing by and watching while a plague wiped out millions of innocent people. Now that they're winning, he finds their talk of peace disgusting and calls them worse than beasts. Berkel watches him silently, his blue eyes reflecting the cold landscape. He doesn't flinch at the accusations, keeping his focus on the dying man. Archman continues his tirade, calling every last one of the knights hypocrites. His eyes burn with a dark, violet light as he refuses to go down without a fight. Mana flares around the Necromancer as he prepares a final, desperate spell. He vows to kill every human left with his own hands, his power swirling in dark green currents. The knights behind Berkel are stunned, seeing that Archman still has enough strength to cast magic. They reel back in shock, gripped by a sudden surge of fear. One of the knights shouts in a panic, realizing how dangerous the situation is. He urges the leader to kill Archman immediately before things get out of hand. Berkel simply tells his men to stand down, remaining completely unfazed by the display of power. He keeps his gaze fixed on Archman, ready to face whatever comes next. He reminds Archman of the 20 million people who fell to the plague. The weight of that number hangs heavy in the air between them. Berkel points out that Archman turned those dead people into an undead army, which was the spark that ignited this whole war. A massive legion of glowing-eyed skeletons rises behind the Necromancer. Archman just scoffs, telling the knight not to make him laugh. He's well aware of the history and doesn't care for the moral lecture. He claims Berkel's people were likely among those millions lost. Archman believes the knight is only here for petty revenge, hiding behind noble words. Archman stares him down, asking Berkel point-blank if he's wrong. He challenges the knight's motivations one last time as the wind howls around them. Berkel remains silent for a moment, his sword gleaming in the dim light. He finally speaks, stating there is only one reason he came all this way. He says he's fighting for the future of the children, hoping to leave them a world without this darkness. He stands tall, his resolve unshakable as he prepares his final move. Archman freezes, genuinely caught off guard by the knight's words. He looks at Berkel with a confused and shaken expression, his focus wavering. Burkle declares he must pass down his choices, beliefs, and hopes to the next generation. He looks directly at Archmond, his eyes full of conviction. In those clear blue eyes, Archmond sees his own corrupted reflection. He's forced to face what he's become, a monster fueled by bitterness and death. He sees a man who is the polar opposite of himself, standing in the light while he sinks into the shadows. The realization hits him harder than any physical blow. A brilliant light suddenly pierces through the dark clouds, illuminating the battlefield. It's as if the world itself is signaling the end of this dark era. Burkle's gaze remains that of an upright, noble knight. He vows to protect the future for his descendants, no matter the cost to himself. Archmond slumps forward, his knees hitting the blood-soaked ice with a heavy thud. He's completely spent, his body finally giving out as his mana dissipates. Burkle raises his sword high, prepared to deliver the final strike. The holy energy around the blade intensifies, casting a harsh glow on the dying necromancer. A voice from the back yells for Burkle to wait, warning him about discarding the holy sword. Burkle ignores the distraction, his mind set on finishing the war here and now. He unsheathes another blade, this one etched with dark purple runes. The sound of steel sliding against leather echoes through the silent battlefield. Burkle points the blade at Archmond's neck and asks if he has any last words. The necromancer remains silent, his head hanging low as the shadows deepen. Archmond finally speaks up, telling Burkle that a necromancer doesn't die quite so easily. Even with his end in sight, he manages one last defiant smirk. The screen fades as the blade begins its descent. This marks the end of Archmond the Necromancer and the beginning of a story nobody expected. Archmond watches as his life flashes before his eyes, a final vow echoing in his mind. He promises that someday he will return. The sword descends with finality, cutting through the air. Archmond's vision blurs as the blade makes contact. In his last moments, he stares directly at the cold steel. His eyes, once full of power, now reflect only the inevitable end. The knight's gauntleted hand grips the hilt tightly. Runes on the blade glow with a sinister purple light as it completes its task. A massive roar erupts from the victorious knights as they celebrate their foe's fall. The shout, "Archmond is dead," rings across the battlefield. His severed head lies on the blood-soaked ground, eyes still partially open. Even as his consciousness fades, the sound of their cheering is the last thing he hears. The knights punch the air in triumph, their silhouettes cast against the dark sky. The 10-year Great War has finally come to an end with the death of the demon of the continent. Everything fades to black as his life's light is extinguished. Archmond, the most feared necromancer in history, has met his end. The final spark of his soul flickers in the void. It's a quiet, cold conclusion to a decade of slaughter. The darkness is absolute. The legendary necromancer is no more, leaving behind only a legacy of terror and blood. Suddenly, a rush of light and sound breaks the silence. Archmond feels himself being pulled through a tunnel of starlight, spinning wildly through space. Thunder rumbles over a grand estate as rain pours down on its ornate towers. Inside a lit window, a new life is beginning. Two maids lean over a cradle, their faces lighting up with excitement. They whisper to each other about how the young master's mouth just moved. Archmond wakes up to the sight of a blurry, giant face looming over him. He's completely disoriented, his mind struggling to process what's happening. The maids coo at him, asking if he slept well. He realizes with a shock that he's been reborn as a baby named Klein. One maid holds up a small mirror, showing him a radiant woman with long silver hair. She tells him that this is his mother, the Duchess. Klein stares up with a blank expression, his tiny body feeling incredibly heavy and unresponsive. He can barely keep his eyes open as they encourage him to speak. He struggles to form words, his face turning red from the effort. The maids cheer him on, hoping his first word will be mama. Instead of a cute baby sound, Klein's eyes widen with a dark intensity. He focuses all his remaining willpower on an ancient incantation. He shouts out a command to summon the gatekeepers of darkness and his undead legions. He expects his army to rise, even in this tiny form. The maids freeze in horror, their smiles vanishing as they realize something is very wrong. The air in the room suddenly turns cold and oppressive. A spark of blue static electricity crackles from his small hand, arching into the air. It's a pathetic remnant of his former power, but enough to terrify the servants. Outside, a massive bolt of lightning strikes the estate's fountain, shattering the stone. The sheer force of his attempted spell has unintended, violent consequences. 15 years have passed since the fall of the world's most feared necromancer. The sun now shines brightly over a grand estate, its central fountain sparkling in the peaceful afternoon light. Nearby, groups of maids gather to whisper and giggle. They can't help but stop their work to gawk as a certain young man makes his appearance. Steady, confident footsteps click against the stone pavement. Someone is approaching with the unmistakable grace of high nobility. A side profile reveals a youth with striking silver hair. Even from a distance, his presence is impossible to ignore, drawing every eye in the garden. Klein walks through the estate grounds with his hands tucked casually into his pockets. He looks every bit the perfect, noble heir, a living masterpiece in the eyes of the adoring staff. His sharp eyes and composed expression give him an air of cold elegance. He seems completely indifferent to the attention he's drawing, focused only on his path. The maids can't help but blush as they watch him pass. They marvel at how dazzling the young master looks today, whispering about his perfection. One wonders aloud what kind of lifestyle leads to such a beautiful appearance. Klein continues on his way, seemingly lost in his own cynical thoughts. Suddenly, a shadow looms over him. He barely has time to react with a startled gasp before a familiar voice calls out from behind. A massive bucket of water comes crashing down right over his head. Garrison Birkman looms over him, shouting for the evil spirit to begone with righteous fury. The priest stares down at the drenched boy, his scarred face twisted in suspicion. He claims he saw a glimpse of the necromancer archman's wicked expression just a moment ago. The maids shriek in shock as holy water drips from Klein's clothes. Garrison remains unmoved, convinced his sudden purification was the only thing that stopped a disaster. Klein stands there soaking wet, the bucket still resting on his head. He asks the priest if he isn't tired of performing these pointless rituals year after year. Garrison doesn't see it as nonsense at all. He firmly believes the soul of Archman still lurks within the young master, requiring constant, forceful purging. Garrison pulls out a spray bottle for round 2, aiming it right at the boy's face. Klein tries to argue that he isn't the necromancer, but the priest only sees more proof in his defiance. Klein watches him with a look of pure disbelief. He wonders if the man has finally lost his mind, as the obsessive surveillance is getting harder to stomach. Fed up, Klein turns and begins to walk away, muttering curses under his breath. He's had more than enough of the priest's fanaticism for one afternoon. Garrison isn't about to let him escape so easily. He barks an order to his subordinates, telling them to catch the boy and give him a proper thrashing for his insolence. A chase breaks out across the estate grounds as Klein sprints for his life. He shouts at the top of his lungs, insisting his name is Klein and that the priest is insane. He can't believe a supposedly holy man would resort to such aggressive tactics. The constant injustice of his daily life is starting to boil over. He ends up submerged, drifting through bubbles of holy water. Images of his past life as a powerful necromancer flicker through his mind like half-remembered dreams. Klein never expected his reincarnation to turn out like this. It's a far cry from the terrifying legacy he once held as the master of the undead. He remembers the day he died clearly, yet he woke up in the tiny body of a newborn. It was a second chance at life he hadn't even imagined possible. The trouble started the moment he opened his eyes and tried to speak. Instead of a baby's cry, his first words were a loud necromancy incantation from his past life. That one mistake branded him a demon from birth. By the age of 3, he was taken away and imprisoned in a cold monastery for purification. It was there that he first met the man who would become his permanent shadow. A hulking figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the light of the Holy Order. Garrison stared down at the small child, unsure whether he was looking at a young master or a monster. It was the start of a long and painful relationship. At the time, Klein had no idea that this meeting was just the beginning. The years ahead would be filled with grueling rituals designed to break his spirit. Day and night, Garrison would loom over his bed, bellowing a 24-hour prayer song. The young boy could do nothing but cover his ears and endure the unending noise. Then came the frozen garlic baths, where he was submerged in ice water and pungent cloves. The priest would dump even more ice over him while chanting prayers at full volume. The rituals only grew more extreme, culminating in the fire purification show. Klein found himself tied to a massive cross, surrounded by flames while Garrison prayed for his soul. He spent years suffering through every imaginable form of religious torture under the guise of purification. His desperate screams for help went unanswered within those silent monastery walls. 5 years have passed since those dark monastery days. The memories of his childhood imprisonment still haunt his life in the Rhineland estate. Back in the present, Klein sits dejectedly on the floor, wearing a colorful, handmade party hat. He looks completely drained, his usual composed mask finally cracking. Nearby, his personal maid Erin kneels in prayer with her hands tightly clasped. She sincerely hopes her young master can grow up healthy as a true descendant of a hero. She continues her earnest prayer, asking for sacred blessings to guide his path. Klein stares blankly, the festive hat feeling like a heavy burden on his head. Finally, his temper snaps. He rips the hat off and hurls it away, shouting in frustration at the constant pressure to live up to a hero's name. Erin freezes in shock, her eyes wide as she watches the hat tumble across the floor. She whispers that she made that hat specifically for him, her voice trembling. Realization hits Klein like a physical blow. He looks down at his hands, instantly regretting his sudden outburst and the hurt he's caused his only loyal companion. He thinks about how much effort she must have put into making the hat with her own small hands. Guilt washes over him as he sees her disappointed expression. He mutters an apology, admitting he went too far in his anger. He's surprised to learn that even this festive hat had a connection to his tormentor, Garrison. With a heavy sigh, Klein bends down to pick up the discarded party hat. He realizes he can't stay mad at a piece of paper when it involves Erin's sincere feelings. Klein stares at the discarded party hat with a look of pure exhaustion. The festive colors feel like a cruel joke compared to the frustration he's feeling. Father Garrison Birkman stands nearby, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the room. He addresses the boy as young Master Klein, though his tone remains stern and watchful. Garrison dabs at a tear, claiming he's truly moved that Klein would wear the hat he painstakingly knitted over the course of a week. He seems completely oblivious to the boy's actual feelings on the matter. Klein immediately begins tearing the hat to shreds with a forced smile. He makes it very clear that he has no intention of ever wearing it again, his patience finally hitting its limit. Garrison points a finger, shouting that Archman's wicked soul has finally appeared. He sees the boy's outburst not as teenage frustration, but as a sign of dark possession. Klein shouts back at the top of his lungs, telling the priest to give back his guilt. He's completely fed up with being treated like a monster for simply having a bad day. A man named Dunkel enters the room, bowing slightly as he addresses Garrison. He asks if the purification ritual has finally been completed for the day. Dunkel notes that the rumors of Klein being the reincarnation of Archman have been circulating for over 10 years now. He seems more level-headed than the fanatic priest, though he still remains cautious. Klein tries to get a word in, pointing out that even the Holy Order said there was nothing wrong with him anymore. Garrison, however, is too busy listening to the Knight Commander. The priest waves him off, focused entirely on his conversation with Dunkel. Klein is left fuming on the floor, ignored by the two men who hold so much power over his life. Dunkel mentions that some requested documents might be delayed. Garrison laughs it off, telling the commander to take all the time he needs, showing a side of himself Klein rarely sees. Klein can't believe the hypocrisy as he glares at them from the carpet. He realizes the priest only acts civil when he's talking to someone of equal status, like a knight commander. He thinks to himself that the old man certainly knows how to play the political game. It's a stark contrast to the aggressive way Garrison treats him on a daily basis. Garrison finally turns to leave, bidding the commander a polite farewell. His back is turned to Klein, but the tension in the room remains thick. He pauses at the doorway, his scarred profile catching the light. He adds a final, ominous thought, noting that in his line of work there is always an if when it comes to evil souls. Klein watches him go with a look of silent, simmering resentment. He's tired of being the subject of the priest's ifs and endless suspicions. The heavy boots of the priest click against the floor as he makes his exit. For a brief moment, Klein finally has some semblance of peace in the room. Garrison sticks his head back in to remind him that the next ritual is on Friday. He tells the boy to keep both his body and mind pure until then, waving a cheerful goodbye. Klein snaps and screams for the man to get out already. He can't stand the priest's mock-friendly attitude after a morning of being splashed with holy water. He flops onto the sofa with a loud groan of frustration. He's completely drained from the constant mental and physical battles he has to fight every single week. Klein mutters to himself, wondering how a supposedly holy man could be so obsessed with torture. He's starting to think Garrison is more of a muscle-bound demon than a priest. Erin enters the room with a fresh towel, looking worried for her master. She asks if he's really not the Necromancer Archmond anymore, her curiosity getting the better of her. Klein tells her he hates even hearing that name and would rather die than be associated with it. He's desperate to leave his past life behind, even if the rest of the world won't let him. He explains that he doesn't even have enough time for his body to recover before the next ritual begins. The endless cycle of purification is taking a serious toll on his physical health. Looking back, Klein realizes he's lived under constant surveillance from the very moment he was reborn. A shadow of his former self as Archmond looms behind him in his memories. Because of the rumors that started in his infancy, he was locked away in a monastery for 7 long years. It was a childhood spent in isolation and religious scrutiny. He rants about how he thought he finally managed to return home, only to be hounded by the same priest. Erin and Dunkel listen in silence, each with their own thoughts on the situation. Erin looks confused and asks what exactly an executor is. She wonders if it's an important title within the holy order that her master should be worried about. Dunkel explains that it's a title given only to the strongest members of the order. His expression is serious as he explains the prestige and power that comes with such a position. Garrison is seen walking away, clutching a holy book in his gloved hand. He is a man who truly embodies the strength and conviction of his faith, no matter how extreme. Dunkel adds that the priest is someone who couldn't be beaten by anyone except the current Duke himself. He is truly an overwhelmingly powerful figure in this world. Erin is amazed, cheering that her young master's family must be incredibly strong to have such people around. Klein, however, just covers his face in a gesture of pure defeat. Curious, Erin asks who Klein thinks is the strongest duke in the entire history of their family. He stops what he's doing, the question clearly striking a chord deep within him. Dunkel suggests that while the others were amazing, the current 7th Duke is a strong contender. Klein, however, immediately counters with a single word: the first. Dunkel is surprised that Klein would choose the founder over his own father. Klein remains silent, his back to the commander as he stares out towards the gallery. Klein speaks with absolute certainty, stating that the first Duke is without a doubt the strongest. There's a weight to his voice that suggests he knows more than he's letting on. Dunkel stares at him, surprised by the intensity of the young master's declaration. He's left wondering what could have sparked such a strong opinion about an ancestor from 2 centuries ago. Erin giggles, telling the commander that she told him the young master likes the first Duke the most. They all stand in the Grand Lounge, surrounded by the opulence of the Rhineland estate. Klein is seen sitting on the edge of a chair, his eyes fixed on a distant portrait. He's not looking at it with admiration, but with a complex mix of disbelief and recognition. Dunkel thinks back on the family's history, noting that it has already been 200 years since the founder established the House of Rhineland. He wonders who could have ever imagined where they'd be today. Klein continues to stare at the portrait on the far wall, his expression unreadable. He can't get the number 200 years out of his head as the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together. He stares directly into the eyes of the man in the painting, his own eyes narrowing in a cold realization. He thinks to himself that he, Archmond the Necromancer, has to accept the impossible truth. Shadowy portraits of the Dukes of Rhineland line the wall, tracing a lineage that spans 2 centuries. From the 2nd to the 7th, each successor's legacy is preserved in the darkened gallery of the estate. A close-up of the first portrait reveals the stern, regal face of the family's founder. His golden blonde hair and cold, calculating gaze suggest a man of immense power and unwavering conviction. The full painting depicts the first Duke Berkel Rhineland, a majestic knight clad in ornate silver and gold armor with a prominent red gem on his chest. He stands tall, clutching a massive holy sword, the very weapon that once changed the course of history. Archmond, reborn as Klein, stares back with a wry, unsettling smile, his silver hair and sharp purple eyes glowing in the low light. The irony of his situation is absolute. He has been reborn as the direct descendant of the very man who ended his life. Erin can only stare in shock as she watches her young master. He's doing something that shouldn't be possible for a human boy, let alone one considered talentless. Garrison Bierkman doesn't share her amazement, his face locked in a permanent, scarred scowl. He watches with a cold intensity, waiting for any hint of something unnatural to surface. The water in the basin bubbles like a cauldron as Klein remains completely submerged. It's been well over a minute now, and there's still no sign of him coming up for air. Two attendants hold the boy down while Garrison stands by, seemingly testing the limits of Klein's endurance. Erin tries to lighten the mood by joking that her young master is basically a fish at this point. Klein finally bursts out of the water, gasping for breath as droplets fly everywhere. He looks completely drained, his body shivering from the intensity of the purification ritual. As the guards release him, Klein hunches over, his silver hair matted and soaking wet. Garrison watches from a distance, looking almost disappointed that the session has come to an end. Garrison explains that he felt an ominous energy coming from Klein's room earlier that day. It's a transparent excuse, and Klein knows the priest is just looking for any reason to continue the torture. While Erin rushes over with a dry towel, Klein tries to steady his breathing. He's furious, but he has to keep his cool and maintain his facade if he wants to survive this house of religious fanatics. The heavy atmosphere is broken when Dunkel, a knight of the house, enters the room. He holds a sealed envelope and announces that Lord Dalton has sent an official invitation. Klein takes the towel and starts drying his hair, his mind immediately shifting gears. He asks who would be sending him a letter, already wary of any attention from the outside world. Dunkel mentions the man who recently dueled Lord Delane at the training grounds. Memories of the encounter flash through Klein's mind, and they're anything but friendly. Klein studies the crinkled parchment, his eyes narrowing at the elegant handwriting. He finds it hard to believe a man like Dalton would ever offer a sincere apology. The letter invites him to a hunting contest at the Conwell estate. While Erin busies herself cleaning up the mess, Klein remains focused on the potential trap hidden in the words. He knows this contest is likely just a way to lure him away from the safety of the Rhineland estate. It's suspicious timing, especially after the scene Dalton made at the training grounds. Dunkel asks if he actually plans on going, given how obvious the trap is. Klein considers his options, realizing that refusing would only make him look weak in the eyes of his enemies. He glances over at the sword leaning against the wall, a plan already forming in his head. There's a cold confidence in his gaze that suggests he's more than ready for a fight. He knows he has a hidden trump card that makes him far more dangerous than anyone suspects. His eyes linger on the blade, seeing it as the key to proving his worth to this family. Over the past few days, Klein has replayed every move he saw at the training grounds in his mind. He's analyzed the techniques until they're practically ingrained in his muscle memory. This new body has a terrifying gift, the ability to perfectly mimic any technique after seeing it just once. It's an incredible tool for a necromancer who needs to blend into a world of swordsmen. Even he doesn't fully understand why his mind works this way now, but he isn't going to question it. He's ready to turn their own weapons against them. Dunkel stands by in silence, waiting for a final answer. He can feel the shift in Klein's energy, even if he doesn't realize the sheer scale of the power the boy is hiding. Klein eventually gives the order to prepare the carriage for the trip. The hunting contest is officially a go, and Klein is eager to see what kind of apology Dalton has planned. Garrison suddenly speaks up, insisting that he must tag along on this journey. The other two just stand there with their arms crossed, watching the exchange with their usual stoic expressions. Klein points a finger at the priest, demanding to know what kind of scheme he's brewing this time. He knows all too well that this man has countless ways of tormenting him. He just wants a single day of peace. But the man is determined to stick by his side, no matter how much he complains. Garrison narrows his eyes, his suspicion still burning as brightly as ever. He's got a bad feeling about today, and he doesn't plan on letting Klein out of his sight for a second. As the carriage pulls away from the massive Rhineland estate, the sun shines down on the lush greenery of the forest road. It looks like a peaceful day for a trip, but the tension inside the coach is thick. The wheels rumble and lurch over the uneven dirt path, jostling everyone inside. It's going to be a long, uncomfortable journey through the wilderness to the Conwell estate. Erin is already feeling the effects of the rough ride, her face turning a sickly shade of green as she battles motion sickness. Garrison just sits there like a statue, completely unfazed by the swaying. Klein hands over a pillow, telling Erin he already warned the two of them not to follow. Despite his harsh words, it's a rare moment of genuine care for the maid who has always stood by his side. He explains that the western forest is rugged and tough for anyone who isn't prepared for it. He watches her out of the corner of his eye, his expression uncharacteristically soft for a moment. Garrison watches the two of them, a trace of an unreadable look flickering in his eyes. Klein tells the girl she'll feel better once she gets some sleep, though he doesn't make a single move to help her. The old priest is surprised by the gesture, commenting on how considerate the young master has become. Klein quickly snaps at him, claiming the pillow was strictly meant for Erin. Klein turns away to stare out the window, his expression returning to its usual brooding state. He doesn't want anyone thinking he's gone soft, especially not a man as dangerous as Garrison. The forest outside is vibrant and full of life, a stark contrast to the memories swirling in his head. To a normal person, it's beautiful, but to Klein, it's a graveyard of his past. In his previous life, this same road was a frozen wasteland littered with the corpses of his fallen enemies. Seeing it so lush and green now is a stinging reminder of his defeat and the passage of time. He can't help but feel a surge of resentment, wondering if this transformation was all Burkle's doing. The man who killed him left a legacy that's hard to escape. Memories of the final battle and Burkle's icy blue eyes flash through his mind in shades of gray. The hero who ended his reign still haunts his thoughts, even 200 years later. Dunkel opens the carriage door, announcing that they've finally arrived at their destination. The time for reflection is over. It's time to face whatever trap awaits them. The Conwell estate looms ahead, a massive and incredibly ornate complex that looks more like a palace than a country home. It's a staggering display of wealth and arrogance from a collateral branch of the family. Klein steps out and takes it all in, questioning if this is really where Dalton lives. Behind him, Erin is still struggling to get her bearings, leaning on Dunkel for support as she stumbles out. The estate is even more lavish than the main Rhineland home, which is saying something. It's clear that Dalton isn't just hosting a contest, he's making a bold statement of power. Klein looks at the guests, noting how they're squandering money on a trivial children's contest. To him, the opulence of the Conwell estate is just a vulgar display of wealth. Someone calls out his name, pulling him away from his thoughts. He turns to see the host of this little gathering approaching him. The collateral noble arrives, leading a pack of massive, snarling black dogs on leashes. He wears an arrogant smirk, clearly enjoying the intimidation factor of his pets. He leans in with a condescending grin, bragging about the quality of his estate's construction. He even mocks Klein's family, claiming they built all this with the spare chain they squeezed out of the main line. One of the dogs whimpers, saliva dripping from its jaws as it stares ahead with wild eyes. It's clear these animals aren't just well-trained, they've been pushed to the edge of starvation. Klein remains silent, his expression unreadable as he listens to the noble's petty insults. He questions when a simple hunting contest turned into a glorified social hour for these people. The noble ignores the cold shoulder, his eyes glinting with a cruel sort of amusement. He tells Klein to stay patient, claiming that he's already got everything perfectly prepared for the day. He holds the leashes tightly in his calloused hand, his knuckles white as he prepares to release the hounds. "Watch closely," he says, a predatory edge creeping into his voice. With a sharp command, the pack of starving dogs lunges forward, their claws digging into the stone floor as they sprint away. The hunt has officially begun, and it's clear this won't be a typical sport. Out on the field, slabs of raw meat have been scattered across the grass as bait. It's a grisly sight, designed to drive the hungry animals into a frenzy. The dogs race across the open ground, their shadows stretching long behind them. They're driven by nothing but primal hunger, ignoring everything but the scent of blood. The noble draws his bow with practiced ease, his eyes locking onto his targets. He explains that a starving dog's sense of smell is far superior to any human's, making them the perfect tools for this hunt. One of the dogs snarls, its teeth bared as it closes in on the bait. It's a terrifying display of raw aggression, exactly what the noble wanted to see. A series of sharp yowls fill the air as arrows find their mark, not in prey, but in the dogs themselves. The noble is shooting his own animals mid-run, showing a total disregard for their lives. He throws his head back and laughs, looking completely manic as he watches the dying animals twitch on the grass. To him, a successful hunt is simply about the thrill of the kill, regardless of the target. Before she can reach him, the noble steps in her way and places a condescending hand on her head. He refers to her as Klein's little pet maid, his tone dripping with mockery. The noble refers to Aaron as a little pet maid, his tone dripping with mockery. He wonders aloud why Klein even bothers to drag such a tiny brat around everywhere. His expression shifts into something even more sinister as he leans down toward the girl. He continues to taunt her, enjoying the power trip over a helpless servant. A hand suddenly clamps down on the noble's wrist with crushing force. Klein doesn't say a word at first, but the intensity of his grip speaks for itself. The noble looks shocked, his arrogant smirk faltering as he tries to pull his arm away. Klein tells him to get his hands off her, his voice low and dangerous. Klein's eyes burn with a cold light as he glares at the man. He delivers a chilling ultimatum. Let go of her now, or he'll break his wrist right then and there. He tightens his hold, his own knuckles straining as he forces the noble's hand away from Aaron. The noble can only hiss in pain, completely caught off guard by the boy's sudden display of strength. The noble shoves Klein back with a frustrated snarl, telling him to stop acting so tough. He's clearly rattled, but he tries to regain his composure by doubling down on his arrogance. Klein ignores the bluster and heads straight for the horses, sliding his foot into a stirrup. He's done with the social games. It's time to move the confrontation to the forest. The noble follows suit, mounting his own horse with a mocking laugh as he tells Klein to follow him. He thinks he's still the one in control of the situation. Dunkel watches with a worried expression, warning Klein that it's far too dangerous to head into the forest alone. Klein just looks back over his shoulder, telling the knight to stay behind and protect Aaron. He pulls a weathered piece of parchment from his pocket and hands it over to Dunkel. It's a vital tool for their plan, one he expects the knight to use if things go south. Dunkel stares at the paper in confusion, realizing it's a magic signal scroll. It's a rare and valuable item, not something you'd usually see in the hands of a talentless heir. A text box explains that the scroll is a single-use magic item used to send a distress signal. It's designed to work even without the user's own mana, making it the perfect fail-safe for someone in Klein's position. Klein's gaze drifts toward the background, where Garrison is sitting and watching them. He notes how suspicious it is that the priest has followed them all the way here, clearly acting as an observer for the main family. He instructs Dunkel to consider any sudden disappearance as a sign that something has gone wrong. He's preparing for the inevitable betrayal he knows is coming. He explains that the moment the scroll is torn, a linked crest will appear on the back of his hand to alert him. He shows the knight the empty space where the mark will manifest, his expression grim. With a final word of encouragement, Klein spurs his horse into a gallop and heads toward the trees. Dunkel can only call out after him, helpless to stop his young master from riding into a potential death trap. Garrison watches the boy ride away, his face partially obscured by shadow. He remains silent, his true intentions as unreadable as ever as he observes the scene unfold. The sun begins to set, casting deep purple and red hues across the sky. The peaceful beauty of the evening is a sharp contrast to the violence brewing in the woods. Klein rides deep into the dark forest, the only sound being the rhythmic thud of his horse's hooves on the soft earth. He's following the trail, knowing that his host is waiting for him somewhere ahead. He suddenly pulls on the reins, his eyes narrowing as he senses a presence nearby. Something isn't right, and his instincts are screaming at him to be on guard. A voice echoes through the trees, mocking him for finally arriving. The wind whistles through the branches, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the clearing. The noble is sitting casually in the middle of the path, cleaning his sword with a disturbing amount of focus. He's surrounded by the carcasses of more dead animals, looking like a king on a throne of filth. Klein dismounts, his hand resting on the flank of his horse as he stares at the grisly scene. He asks what the meaning of all this is, though he likely already knows the answer. He walks closer to the bodies on the ground, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and disgust. He can't believe the sheer waste of life he's seeing. Several more of the noble's black dogs lie dead in the grass, their bodies cold and stiff. It's a slaughterhouse, and it's clear that the contest was never about hunting wild game. The collateral noble stands before Klein, a cruel smirk on his face. He explains that this isn't just a simple visit, it's the grand finale of today's hunt, and Klein is the final prize. He draws his sword with a sharp metallic ring, his eyes wide with a manic, bloodthirsty intensity. He drops all pretenses, declaring his intention to kill Klein right here in the forest. Klein remains standing calmly beside his horse, his expression unreadable as he absorbs the threat. The collateral noble continues his tirade, boasting about how he'll present Klein's head to Delane as a trophy. He laughs mockingly at the Reinlant name, calling the entire family a pathetic laughingstock. Klein's gaze hardens, his silver hair catching the dim light as he finally begins to react. The collateral noble steps closer, his sword held low as he continues to belittle the boy. He calls Klein an empty shell with no power or purpose, completely underestimating the soul dwelling within him. Behind the collateral noble, a large group of armed men emerges from the shadows of the trees, surrounding the clearing. He gestures toward them, telling Klein that he won't even get a chance to struggle. The men look like seasoned mercenaries, some bearing scars and bandages, all wearing sinister grins. The collateral noble claims that the dukedom rightfully belongs to the collateral branch anyway. Archers draw their bows, the tension of the strings audible as they aim for the lone boy. The collateral noble tells Klein to blame himself for being born into such a pathetic family. Klein's face is shown in profile, his expression shifting from stoicism to something far more dangerous. He repeats the man's words back to him, his voice low and unsettlingly calm. The collateral noble's face contorts into a hideous, jagged grin as he anticipates the kill. He envisions the headlines for tomorrow, mocking the fallen swordsman family of the North. He leans in close, his eyes wide and crazed as he delivers his final insult. He tells Klein that the young master of Rhineland is destined to end up as nothing more than dog food. A close-up of Klein's face shows a subtle, mocking shift in his expression. The text bubble reveals the noble's hollow justification for the murder, claiming it's for the children's future. Klein's head stays bowed for a moment before a soft, dry sound escapes his throat. He's laughing, a quiet mocking that catches the collateral noble completely off guard. The laughter quickly builds into a full, boisterous cackle as Klein throws his head back. A dark, towering silhouette of his former self, Archmond, looms behind him in the shadows. The collateral noble's jaw drops, his face turning pale with frustration and growing unease. He snaps at the boy, asking if he's finally lost his mind in the face of certain death. Klein covers his face with one hand, his laughter subsiding into a cold, predatory silence. He begins to speak again, his voice now carrying an archaic weight that doesn't belong to a teenager. He looks up, his eyes now glowing with a piercing, unnatural red light. He tells the collateral noble that a reckless brat truly doesn't know his place, his entire aura shifting into something monstrous. The collateral noble flinches, sweat beads forming on his brow as he feels the sudden, suffocating pressure radiating from the boy. He realizes with a jolt that something is fundamentally wrong. Klein declares that the family the man mocks was built upon the price of his own death. His gaze is icy, filled with a millennia's worth of resentment for the disrespect being shown. He stands in the center of the clearing as wisps of eerie blue-green energy begin to swirl around his feet. The atmosphere of the forest turns frigid, the very air vibrating with necromantic power. The collateral noble stumbles back, his voice trembling as he asks if this is magic. Klein corrects him with a chilling finality, stating that he doesn't use mana, this is demonic energy. The blue-green flames erupt around him, forming into ghostly skeletal claws that reach out from the shadows. Klein's silver hair whips in the magical wind, his presence now commandingly dark. The collateral noble tries to shield his eyes from the blinding flare of energy, his bravado completely shattered. He shouts to his men, desperately trying to understand what kind of monster he's actually facing. A close-up of Klein's eye shows the swirling depths of his power, cold and focused. He ignores the noble's panic, his mind already set on the ritual he's about to perform. He smirks, a look of pure malice crossing his face as he prepares to summon his army. He begins the incantation, calling upon the ancient souls that have been buried in the depths of time. Klein levitates slightly off the ground, his arms outstretched as the demonic energy flows through him like a conduit. He commands the dead to rise once more in his name. 3 words of power echo through the clearing: feast, devour, and feast again. Ghostly, glowing skulls begin to manifest in the swirling vortex of energy behind him. The collateral noble's face is a mask of pure terror, his eyes wide and bloodshot as he screams that this is impossible. He realizes too late that he hasn't cornered a helpless boy, but a legendary demon. Archman's skeleton army, with glowing orange eyes and dark tattered hoods, begin to climb out of the very ground. One of the mercenaries shouts out a name in disbelief: the legendary Necromancer. Klein points a single finger toward the cowering men, a wicked grin stretching across his face. He gives his army a simple, final order: devour every last one of them. A single red light flickers in the pitch black. I thought I had forgotten, but the memory is still there, buried deep in the void. Rows of ancient skulls are piled up in the shadows. They're a grim reminder of a past that refuses to stay dead. A warrior in dark armor walks through the field of bone. 200 years have passed since Archman last stood in this place. The ground is littered with the remains of those who fell before him. To him, it all feels like a blur of distant, fatting days. Shadowy hands reach up from the abyss, grasping at nothing. He can still feel their presence resonating within him. Klein stands on a jagged peak, surrounded by a deep red glow. The connection to the dead is pulsing through the darkness, stronger than ever. More hands claw at the air as the voices of the dead call out to him. They're waiting for their master to give the command. He holds his hand out, sensing the pulse of the energy meeting his fingers. This feeling, this trace of power, it's exactly as he remembers. Klein clenches his fist as red energy bleeds out between his fingers. It's a nostalgic sensation he hasn't felt in a very long time. The collateral noble stares in shock, his face pale and his eyes wide. He can't wrap his head around what's happening right in front of him. Massive skeletons with glowing orange eyes rise from the earth to flank their master. The noble screams out the name Archman in pure terror. Klein smirks, his silver hair catching the light as he looks down at his enemy. He admits that he used to go by that name once upon a time. Dark clouds swirl overhead as the wind picks up across the clearing. The air has suddenly grown heavy with an ancient, dark power. The mercenaries start to sweat, their initial confidence quickly fading. They try to tell themselves that the stories of Archman were just rumors. Klein stands calm in the center of the mist, his gaze steady. His new army is forming a circle around him, silent and ready. One of the skeletons lets out a hollow hiss, its orange eyes burning bright in the gloom. It looks hungry for a fight. The collateral noble takes a second to compose himself, looking over the bony figures. He's trying to find a reason to keep acting tough in front of his men. He and his men burst out laughing, pointing their fingers at the skeletons. They jeer at the bucket-head monsters, calling them pathetic. Klein stares down at the ground, his expression unreadable as they continue to jeer. The noble sneers, calling his summons nothing but low-level trash. The mercenaries join in the mockery, bragging about how many skeletons they've smashed before. They think these creatures are just more garbage to clear out. The two groups face each other across the wide clearing. The noble tells his men to take a bone as a souvenir once they've finished the job. He waves his hand, ordering the soldiers to break through and clear the path. He's ready to put an end to this reckless brat right now. The archers step forward and pull their bowstrings tight. They aim a full volley directly at the small boy standing in the suit. Klein stands his ground, completely unfazed by the weapons pointed at him. He calmly tells his own units to prepare for the engagement. A mercenary crossbowman takes aim, his finger ready on the trigger. He's looking for a quick kill shot. The order to fire rings out, and a swarm of arrows is released into the air. They fly across the clearing with lethal speed. A dark cloud of arrows rains down on Klein's position. It looks like there's nowhere left for him to run. The projectiles converge on the boy from every direction. He doesn't move an inch as the steel tips close in on him. Klein's eyes track the flight of the arrows, the points reflecting in his pupils. He doesn't even bother to blink as death approaches. The arrows impact the ground and the figures in the mist with a series of heavy thuds. Dust and debris kick up from the force of the volley. The collateral noble stands with a smug grin, thinking the fight is already over. He's sure Klein has been turned into a bloody pulp by now. His smirk disappears as he spots something moving in the settling dust. His eyes widen in surprise as he sees the result of the attack. Several arrows are stuck in the skeletons, but they haven't budged an inch. They stand there, completely unfazed by the projectiles. The skeletons have formed a tight shield wall, their heavy iron shields locked together. Every single arrow was blocked with professional military precision. Klein looks up with a sharp, mocking smile. He notes that it's been a long 200 years since anyone has seen a real undead army. The noble is stunned, his mouth hanging open. He can't understand how they suddenly have shields that weren't there a moment ago. Klein stands tall, his aura growing more intense as he looks down on his attackers. He tells them that if these were typical skeletons, he might be right to be surprised. A cruel glint appears in his eyes as he narrows his gaze. He makes it clear that his skeletons are on a completely different level than anything they've fought. The noble's arrogance is gone, replaced by a look of pure dread. He realizes too late that he's in way over his head. On Klein's command, the skeletons break their defensive wall and prepare to charge. The front line disengages, moving with incredible speed across the clearing. He reflects on the past, thinking about the future someone once killed him to protect. Now he's facing the very people who dared to mock and insult it. Klein gives the final order, his voice cold and sharp. He tells every unit under his command to prepare to attack. Klein clenches his fist, a dark smirk playing on his lips as he prepares to unleash his power. He commands his army to charge, ready to crush his enemies with his own hands. The skeletons lunge forward with inhuman speed, their glowing eyes fixed on the terrified mercenaries. They move with a grace that shouldn't be possible for a pile of bones. The collateral noble flinches back, his face contorted in disbelief as he watches the attack begin. He can't believe the monsters are actually moving this fast. A tide of undead sprints across the clearing, closing the distance in seconds. The noble screams out in shock, never having seen skeletons run with such purpose. The noble desperately shouts at his men to maintain their formation and not panic. He tries to convince them that they're just mindless skeletons, nothing they can't handle. A mercenary is caught off guard, a dark blade piercing straight through his chest from behind. He gasps as blood sprays from his mouth, his eyes wide with shock. Chaos erupts in the clearing as the skeletons tear through the mercenary ranks with ruthless efficiency. Screams of agony fill the air as the defensive line completely collapses. The noble looks on in horror, blood splattering across the ground around him as his men are cut down. He curses under his breath, finally realizing how badly he underestimated the boy. Klein watches the slaughter from a distance, his expression cold and detached. He calmly gives the order for his second crossbow unit to move into position and surround the survivors. High above in the tree branches, skeleton snipers lock onto their targets with mechanical precision. The mercenaries below look up, sweating as they realize they're trapped in a crossfire. The skeleton crossbowmen level their weapons, the glowing orange in their sockets burning bright. They're ready to unleash a rain of bolts from above. Panic spreads through the surviving mercenaries as they realize they're being targeted from the trees. They scramble to find any cover, screaming for everyone to run. Klein gives the final word with a sharp, merciless look in his eyes. He commands his units to fire without hesitation. A volley of heavy bolts whistles through the air, aimed directly at the fleeing mercenaries. They move too fast for any normal human to dodge. The bolts find their marks, tearing into the backs of the panicked men as they try to escape. The force of the impact knocks them straight to the ground. Silhouettes of the falling mercenaries are cast against the trees as they're pinned down by the relentless fire. The clearing is filled with the sounds of impacts and desperate groans of pain. The noble swings his sword in a desperate arc, struggling to make sense of the slaughter. He realizes these aren't the weak, mindless skeletons he's used to fighting. He stares at the carnage, sweat beads rolling down his face as his breathing becomes ragged. He refuses to believe this is actually happening to his veteran mercenaries. The noble realizes that at this rate, it's only a matter of time before they're completely wiped out. True fear is finally starting to set in as he watches his men fall one by one. He bellows a new command, telling everyone to drop their crossbows and stop wasting time reloading. He orders them to switch to close combat for a final, desperate stand. The noble clashes blades with one of the skeletons, his eyes wide and desperate. He screams at the creature, asking if it's even listening to his demands. The skeleton's jaw hangs open in a hollow grin as it presses its weight against the noble's sword. He glares back, his teeth gritted in pure frustration. With a powerful swing, the noble manages to slice clean through the skeleton's neck. He shouts an insult at the undead bastard as its head flies off into the air. The skull hits the grass with a heavy thud, rolling away from the headless body. The noble stands over it, breathing heavily as he thinks he's finally won. He bursts into a manic, relieved laugh, thinking he's finally found a way to stop them. He boasts about knowing that aiming for the head would be their only weakness. Behind him, the headless skeleton continues to move, swinging its massive blade in a wide arc. The noble's triumph is cut short as he feels the wind from the incoming strike. He spins around, his eyes nearly popping out of his head in disbelief. He can't understand how the thing is still standing and fighting after being decapitated. Sweat pours down his face as he stands frozen in shock. Most people think cutting off the head is the end of an undead, but he's about to learn a terrifying lesson. Klein watches the noble's despair with a cruel, mocking smirk. He reminds his enemy that he already warned him about the power of his personal army. The headless skeleton walks calmly toward its own skull, ignoring the noble entirely. Klein explains that his skeletons are fundamentally different from any common undead. A skeletal hand reaches down and firmly grasps the skull by its eye sockets. The glowing orange eyes never once flicker out, even while detached. With a sickening crunch of bone, the skeleton snaps its head back onto its neck. Klein remarks that this invincibility is exactly how he, Archmond, once conquered the entire continent. The noble stares in utter silence, his sword trembling in his hand. He can't believe what he just witnessed. The creature reattached its own head like it was nothing. A close-up of the skeleton's face reveals its glowing eyes burning with a renewed, predatory intensity. Klein explains that his summons are immortal and follow every tactical order to the letter. A surviving mercenary stands paralyzed with fear, his jaw hanging open as he looks around the clearing. He can't even begin to process what kind of monsters they're really up against now. Dalton Conwell is losing it as his men get torn apart. The skeletons just keep getting back up, no matter how many times they're cut down. "Why won't they just stay dead?" he screams in pure desperation. Klein watches the chaos with a cold, practiced eye. 11 skeletons is his current limit in this young body, but it's clearly more than enough to handle a few mercenaries. He's just getting started. The lackeys are breaking into a cold sweat, their hands trembling as they struggle to keep their cool. Klein just smirks at them, asking if they're ready to keep the game going. It's a terrifying offer. A long, agonizing scream echoes through the dark woods, signaling the end for another guard. All around them, the forest is filled with the sounds of a one-sided slaughter. Far away from the blood and screaming, the mansion grounds are quiet. A fountain splashes softly in the moonlight, a world away from the violence in the trees. Someone is laughing, enjoying the peaceful night. Garrisonal and Aaron are sitting by the water, catching up while the master is away. The maid is curious about Klein's past, asking if he really spent his time at the monastery the way the stories say. Aaron can't help but laugh, her twintails bouncing as she listens to Garrison's stories. She finds the whole idea of a younger Master Klein hilarious. The knight just watches her with a calm, amused expression. Garrison smiles, noting how much the young maid clearly adores her master. He seems to find her devotion genuine and heartwarming. Erin puffs out her cheeks in pride. "Well, of course I am," she declares, her loyalty unshakable. Meanwhile, back in the woods, the atmosphere is anything but proud. It's pure terror as someone begs for mercy. One of the remaining mercenaries is sobbing, completely broken as he faces a monster he can't kill. He's begging Klein to stop, his voice cracking with fear. But mercy isn't on the menu tonight. A skeleton guard looms over the crying man, its blade coming down with a heavy, final thud. There's no hesitation in its movements. Blood sprays across the dark trees in a violent arc. Even as people are dying, Erin's voiceover continues, talking about how Klein used to share his cookies with her. It's a jarring contrast. She smiles warmly, remembering him as the gentlest person in the world. To her, he's a saint, completely unaware of the bloodbath happening just a few miles away. The gentlest person in the world currently has blood splattered across his face. Klein watches the massacre with a cold, detached expression, pointing out the next target for his undead army. The skeletons finish the job, cutting down the last of the mercenaries with ruthless efficiency. The clearing is left silent, save for the sound of steel sliding into flesh. Dalton swings his sword wildly, his eyes wide and frantic. He's the only one left, and he's fighting like a cornered animal. It's clear his noble arrogance has completely vanished. He manages to land a solid strike, his blade flashing in the moonlight as he cuts into one of the skeletons. For a split second, he thinks he has a chance. But the victory is short-lived. The skeleton's head just snaps back into place with a dry, rattling sound. It doesn't even slow down. Dalton can only watch in horror as it regenerates instantly. He's grinding his teeth, curse words falling from his lips as he realizes how hopeless this is. These things just won't stay down no matter how many times he breaks them. Then a realization hits him. He looks toward the boy standing calmly at the edge of the clearing. That brat, he thinks. If he can kill the caster, the whole spell has to break. He weaves through the chaos, ignoring the skeletons as they continue to tear through the dead. Every second counts if he wants to reach his target. This is his one and only shot. Dalton lunges forward, screaming Klein's name as he puts everything into a final charge. He's determined to end this right here, even if it's the last thing he does. He screams that the playing with corpses ends now. In his mind, it doesn't matter if they're undead. Once the boy is dead, the game is over. His face is twisted in a mask of pure rage. His sword comes down in a heavy, desperate arc aimed straight for Klein's head. The boy doesn't even flinch, standing perfectly still as the blade nears him. At the very last second, Klein's eye ignites with a sharp, purple glow. A star-shaped pupil pulses with power, signaling the activation of something dangerous. He's been waiting for this. With the eye active, everything slows down for him. He can see the exact path of Dalton's blade and every weakness in the man's stance. He's seeing the world on a completely different level. Klein reaches for his hilt, dark energy crackling around his hands like static. He's ready to counter, his movements perfectly calculated. The noble doesn't stand a chance. A phantom image of Berkel Rhineland flashes in his mind. Klein is recalling a legendary secret technique he only ever saw once, a move that defines his new family's strength. He's going to mimic it perfectly. Dalton's eyes widen as he recognizes the stance. He knows that technique, but there's no way this pathetic boy should be able to pull it off. He realizes too late that he's in over his head. Meteor sword, a single blinding arc of energy tears through the darkness. It's a flawless strike, combining his physical strength with his old-world knowledge. Dalton's charge is cut short instantly. The noble freezes, his chest split wide open as blood sprays across his clothes. He looks down in disbelief, barely able to process what just happened. Klein coldly tells him not to expect a peaceful end. The light in Klein's eye is chilling and final. "Your judgment begins now," he says, his voice devoid of any emotion. The battle is over, but for Dalton, the nightmare is just starting. The night sky is still and silent, indifferent to the violence that just took place. The clouds drift slowly over the blood-soaked clearing. It's a lonely place to die. Dalton collapses onto the grass, coughing up blood as he stares at the boy who just ended him. Klein stands over the dying man, looking down with a mix of pity and cold satisfaction. He was right. Dalton was easy prey. This moment triggers a memory of his past life as Archmond. He remembers being defeated by Burkle Rhineland, a loss that he's still carrying within his soul. This second chance is his way to fix that weakness. It's a strange twist of fate, really. The very family he hated is now the one giving him the tools to survive and reclaim his power. The irony isn't lost on him. The demonic energy of his old self flares up around his hand, glowing with a bright blue flame. It's the power of the necromancer who once commanded legions, now resting in the hands of a young boy. He feels his strength returning. He grips his sword, his knuckles white as he looks at the blood-stained blade. This weapon, and the family name it represents, gave him the power he needed to protect himself tonight. It's time to build something new. The blood on his face is a reminder of the price of survival. With every enemy he kills, he feels himself becoming stronger, his soul knitting back together in this new world. He's not just Klein anymore. Dalton stares up with blank, unseeing eyes, his life finally slipping away in a pool of blood. Klein looks at the body, realizing he can no longer ignore the path he's been forced onto. His past and present have finally merged. He turns his back on the corpse and starts to walk away, his steps light on the grass. He has a lot of work to do and a debt to settle. Just you wait, Burkle, he thinks, his eyes set on a much bigger target. Klein stares into the distance, his mind already moving past the corpses at his feet. This ruined house, I'll rebuild it myself, he resolves, the weight of his legacy finally becoming his own. In a place far beyond the forest, a single eye flutters open. A pained groan escapes as a soul begins to realize its surroundings have changed. Dalton Conwell is lost in a suffocating darkness, his voice echoing in a void where he can't see a single thing. He's starting to panic, the pitch-black silence more terrifying than the fight he just lost. He tries to shift his weight, but a heavy metal shackle clinks as it bites into his ankle. He's completely immobilized in the dark. The gloom recedes just enough to show he's strapped to a massive, spiky stone chair. His eyes go wide as he realizes he can't move an inch, his hands and legs firmly bolted down. A tall silhouette approaches him from the shadows. "You're awake," a deep, imposing voice calls out, cutting through the silence of the void. The figure steps into the light, revealing the spirit form of Archmond. He looks down at Dalton with glowing, merciless eyes and explains that this is the afterlife, a world he created himself to judge the dead. Dalton can barely gasp out the necromancer's name, his mind reeling from the impossibility of it all. Archmond simply confirms the nightmare is his new reality. The judgment starts with Dalton's favorite hobby, hunting. Archmond reminds him of the dogs he starved and tortured just to make the chase more entertaining. He's bringing every sin to the surface. Flashes of the past show Dalton laughing as he let his arrows fly into helpless, fleeing hounds. Archmond remembers the sadistic joy on the noble's face as clearly as if it were happening right now. Dalton screams at him to stop talking nonsense, trying to bluff his way out of the situation. He demands that Archmond release him immediately, his arrogance still flaring even in his shackles. He stops mid-shout, his breath catching as the pieces of the puzzle start falling into place. A cold dread settles in his stomach as he thinks back to the clearing. The memory of Klein's blade cutting through him is vivid and undeniable. He remembers the cold bite of the steel and the spray of blood as he fell. He looks down at his chest, baffled by the fact that he feels perfectly fine despite the lethal wound. Archmond tells him the truth. He's already dead, and this place is only for returning the karma of his life. Dalton begs for it to stop, his voice high and thin with desperation. He's pleading to be let go, his face glistening with sweat as the truth sinks in. He's terrified of what's coming next. Archmond's hand glows with an eerie, blue soul fire as he prepares the next stage of the punishment. Whether Dalton believes it or not doesn't change a thing. The verdict is final. A pack of spectral hounds with glowing blue eyes rises from the shadows around the chair. Archmond tells Dalton that the time has come to pay for his sins in the most literal way possible. The noble's eyes bulge in pure terror as he stares at the snarling beasts. He's completely defenseless, held tight by the stone and iron. The dogs bray and growl, their teeth snapping close to Dalton's face. They're a reflection of the animals he once abused, and they're hungry for retribution. They lunge forward, the clearing filled with the sounds of snarling and tearing. Archman tells him to listen to the screams of the lives he ended, now they're his own. Dalton grinds his teeth as the pain of the afterlife starts to take hold. It's a sensory overload of agony that he can't wake up from. The darkness of the void seems to grow heavier as Archman delivers his final decree. This is the hell Dalton built for himself with every cruel choice he made in life. There is no escape. Dalton's scream of "it hurts" is the only sound left in the void. He's being torn apart by the very cruelty he used to cherish. He begs and pleads for mercy, his eyes rolling back in his head as the fluid of his fear streams down his face. It's a pathetic end for a man who thought he was untouchable. A final, tearful look before his consciousness is overwhelmed by the shadows. His physical life and his pride are both gone now. Back in the real world, Dalton's body lies lifeless in the grass, his face a mask of the terror he felt at the end. The forest is quiet once again. Klein stands alone in the clearing, the weight of the fight finally starting to show on his young face. He's survived, but he knows this is just the first of many battles to come. He looks at his reflection in the blade, his silver hair messy and face splattered with blood. He doesn't look like a young master anymore, he looks like a survivor. His skeleton summons rattle as they stand behind him, their orange eyes fatting as their task is complete. Klein looks at them with a strange sense of gratitude. They've done well. He raises his hand, a soft green light pulsing from his palm. He decides to repay the favor for their help in this first real trial. "I shall break the curse that binds you and grant you freedom," he says. One by one, the skeletons begin to crumble into glowing green sparks. The embers drift up into the night sky, disappearing into the trees like fireflies. The clearing is left empty, and for a moment the silence of the forest is the only thing left. Klein stands alone in the middle of the dark clearing, surrounded by glowing blue embers of energy. He looks down at his hands, his expression calm as the silence of the forest settles back in. Bodies are scattered across the grass. Klein thinks about how death works and why exactly he was brought back to this world. A hooded figure suddenly steps out of the shadows. The mysterious stranger admits he never expected the young master to be a necromancer. Klein turns to face the intruder, asking him who the hell he is. The mysterious priest doesn't answer. Instead, he conjures a ball of swirling green energy between his hands. The green magic spills across the dirt, seeping into the fallen guards like a toxic mist. One of the dead men twitches as his eyes snap open, filled with an eerie, artificial life. The reanimated eye is cold and lifeless, staring at nothing as the magic takes hold. More corpses pull themselves off the ground, forming a new, grotesque army. The priest is a necromancer too. Klein recognizes the spell immediately. It's soul return magic, a technique used to puppet the dead. The mysterious priest smirks, nodding that since Dalton failed, these corpses will have to be the ones to get the job done. The scene shifts away from the forest to the peaceful mountains near the estate. Aaron is laughing, telling Dunkel some funny stories about Klein's childhood. Dunkel isn't paying attention. He's looking down at the signal magic scroll in his hands. He wonders why the young master would take an emergency item like this for a simple hunting trip. It's been 3 hours since Klein left with Dalton, and Dunkel's gut is telling him something is wrong. He decides he can't wait any longer and heads for his horse, but the other guards try to stop him. They remind him that the hunting competition is still on, and he needs to stay at his post. Dunkel gives them a cold look, his patience completely gone. He notices the family crest on the breastplates of the men blocking his way. They're Dalton's guards. He realized they're deliberately stalling him, which means the hunt was definitely a trap. He identifies himself as the knight commander of the Rhineland family and warns them to step aside. His glare is so intense that the guards actually flinch in fear. They start sweating, realizing they can't actually stop a man like him. Aaron runs up and asks if something is wrong. Dunkel tells her to listen closely. He tells her to head back to the estate and take the priest with her for safety. Aaron looks confused and mentions that the priest just left a little while ago. Dunkel freezes. He remembers Klein's warning about the priest acting suspicious. It hits him the priest didn't leave. He followed Klein into the forest. He curses and throws himself into the saddle, mounting his horse in one motion. He bites down on the scroll to activate the signal, realizing this whole situation was planned from the start. He spurs his horse into a gallop, racing toward the forest at full speed. Back in the woods, Klein is surrounded by the priest's wall of undead puppets. The fight with Dalton drained all of his demonic energy. He's powerless to use his own necromancy now. He watches as the corpses groan and slowly close the distance. The mysterious priest points at him and commands the army to move. He gives the final order to eliminate the young master. Klein clenches his fist, mocking the guy for thinking such cheap tricks would actually work on him. The seal on his hand begins to glow with a bright, celestial light. The undead charge forward, blades drawn and ready to kill. Klein just smirks, looking the priest right in the eye and telling him he's absolutely screwed. The mysterious priest looks up in shock, as his visor reflects a sudden, blinding glow that cuts through the dark forest. A massive pillar of golden light strikes the earth, the impact shaking the trees and drowning out the groans of the undead. The light clears to reveal Garrison Birkman standing in a scorched crater, holy energy radiating from his massive, muscular frame. Garrison is an agent of the Holy Order, a powerhouse sent to deal with the rising darkness. His eyes are fixed on the horde, glowing with a divine intensity that seems to burn right through the gloom. Garrison calls out to the light as he prepares to purge the area. The holy energy continues to ripple outward, tearing through the reanimated corpses and reducing them to ash. Garrison stands tall, commanding the dead to be granted a peaceful rest. He turns toward Klein, telling the boy he can rest easy now that the church has intervened. Garrison's silhouette is imposing against the fatting holy flare. The mysterious priest is frozen in shock, his hands trembling as he realizes his necromancy is being completely overpowered. He can only stare at the newcomer in disbelief. A close-up of Garrison's face reveals a cold, determined look as he prepares to deliver his brand of divine justice. Divine energy crackles around him. The narrator introduces Garrison Birkman as a Holy Order agent, a man bred for battle and absolute devotion. Garrison stands ready, his presence alone silencing the forest. These agents are the Pope's most trusted human weapons, warriors who carry out the Church's orders with total obedience. They are legends of the Holy Order, feared by heretics across the continent. They are known as the Church's strongest assets, figures who bridge the gap between holy men and absolute monsters. Garrison is just one of these three terrifying entities. Only these select few are capable of wielding the ancient holy relics left behind by Saint Gaul himself. These relics grant them power far beyond any ordinary knight or mage. A single agent is said to possess the destructive power of an entire fortress, capable of leveling anything in their path. Garrison demonstrates this power as he pulverizes the undead with a single pulse of energy. The mysterious priest winces as the sheer pressure of the holy light begins to crush his own dark magic. He struggles to maintain his focus while the world around him explodes in golden light. The undead guards are obliterated by the force of the blast, their bodies shattered into pieces. The priest can only watch as his army is reduced to scrap in seconds. He stares at the massive man, his pale face reflecting the realization that he is standing before one of the most dangerous men in the world. Garrison's power is unlike anything he's ever seen. Among the three human weapons, Garrison is the one who boasts the greatest raw physical strength. He is a mountain of a man with the power to crush armor with his bare hands. Garrison tells Klein to rest easy, his smile revealing a zealous edge as he enjoys the work of his order. Klein watches, stunned by the sudden turn of events. Garrison stands tall, his shadow stretching across the blood-soaked ground as more undead groan and fall around him. He is the master of this battlefield now. The remaining corpses groan and twitch as they try to stand, but their bodies are already failing. The presence of the agent is physically repelling the dark magic. The undead shriek in agony as they try to lunge at the massive knight, their forms already starting to disintegrate under the pressure. Garrison doesn't even bother to move to defend himself. He walks through the field of carnage with absolute confidence, the ground cracking under his heavy steps. The undead army is no more than an annoyance to him. Garrison smashes a corpse into the ground with a single, brutal strike, blood spraying, as he tells the sinners to ask and pray for their souls. He swings his arm in a wide arc, a trail of holy energy following the motion and clearing a path through the trees. His movements are terrifyingly efficient. A close-up of Garrison shows his eyes burning with a zealous fury. He promises to grant the heretics a baptism of fire. The last of the undead scream as they are caught in the wake of his power, their souls finally being forced from their bodies. Garrison continues his relentless march. The agent's foot slams into the earth, sending a tremor through the clearing and throwing the surviving guards into the air. He will cleanse them of their sins. The ground erupts as holy energy bursts from below, shattering the forest floor and pulverizing the remaining undead. The clearing is filled with the sound of destruction. Garrison smashes more skulls with his massive holy book, blood spraying across his robes with every brutal thud. He refers to this violent slaughter as mercy. He stands in the middle of the carnage, the blood-stained book in hand, as he delivers his final judgment. The undead army has been completely wiped out. Garrison looks down, his face a mask of grim satisfaction as he finishes his purge. To him, this isn't just a fight, it's a religious duty. The mysterious priest realizes he is completely outmatched. He can't believe a church agent has appeared here, and he's terrified of what's coming next. He stares at Garrison's power, his mind reeling as he wonders what the hell kind of monster he stumbled upon. Survival is the only thing on his mind now. Panic finally takes over, and the priest turns to flee back into the darkness of the forest. He knows he can't win, and his deal with the shadows has just turned into a death sentence. He runs as fast as he can, his boots pounding against the grass as he tries to put distance between himself and the agent. He's desperate to get away from the light. His mask falls off in his haste, clattering to the ground as he continues his frantic retreat. He doesn't look back, his focus entirely on escaping. Garrison reaches out with blinding speed and grabs the priest by the back of the head. The priest freezes, his escape cut short by the massive hand of the agent. The priest's hood is pulled back to reveal a young man with red hair, his face twisted in a scream of pure terror. He pleads for Garrison to wait, but there is no mercy here. Garrison informs the sinner that his prayer is not yet finished. He tells the priest to be grateful for the judgment he's about to receive as he looms over him. Tears stream down the priest's face as he looks up at his executioner, knowing his death is only a moment away. The weight of his judgment is finally bestowed upon him. In the name of the light, Garrison delivers the final execution. The impact is brutal, leaving a spray of blood in the air as the priest is silenced for good. Klein stands alone in the background, watching in silence as the forest goes quiet once again. He sweats under the crushing pressure of the agent's lingering aura, realizing the sheer power of the church's weapons. A grisly eyeball rolls across the forest floor, a silent testament to the absolute destruction Garrison just unleashed upon the heretics. The darkness of the woods seems to swallow the gore as the holy light of the execution begins to dim. Klein remains frozen in place, a single bead of sweat rolling down his pale face as he hears his name called by a voice from the edge of the clearing. The crushing weight of the battle's end and the lingering aura of the agent have left him momentarily paralyzed. The narrator reflects on the terrifying scale of Garrison Bierkman's power, nodding that the man ended the entire massacre with nothing more than a single step and a charge. His massive silhouette fades into the distance, leaving behind a field of scorched earth and broken remains. Klein's eyes are wide with intense focus as he continues to feel the residual pressure of Garrison's aura pressing down on him like a physical weight. It wasn't just the physical violence that ended the fight, but the sheer spiritual presence of the agent that dictated the entire encounter. He stares down at the carnage, where over 20 bodies were shredded into unrecognizable pieces in an instant without the agent even drawing a weapon. The raw, unfiltered strength of the church's human weapon has left an indelible mark on Klein's understanding of the power gap he must one day bridge. A hand reaches out, its fingers cold and lifeless like an executioner's final sentence. It's stained dark with blood, the air around it heavy and oppressive. Priest Garrison stands over the carnage, watching blood drip from his own hands onto the forest floor. He already knows something far darker than a simple monster was at work here. He looks down with a grim, knowing smile. The traces of necromancy are everywhere, but they don't quite fit the scene. Garrison drops a heavy, blood-caked hand onto Klein's shoulder, pinning him in place. He stares right through the boy with those intense eyes. That foul energy he sensed, it didn't come from the dead monster. Klein can feel the weight of that gaze. This man isn't just a priest, he's a predator hunting for even the slightest slip-up. The grip on his shoulder tightens. One wrong word, and the Holy Order will execute him right where he stands. Suddenly, a frantic shout breaks the silence from across the clearing. Dunkel comes charging in on horseback, his face pale with worry. He's been searching desperately for the young master. Klein looks back, his vision starting to flicker and fade. The toll of using Archman's power in a body this weak is finally catching up. A thin trail of blood leaks from the corner of his mouth as he struggles to stay conscious. His heart hammers against his ribs, sounding like a frantic drum in the quiet forest. Dunkel leaps from his horse and sprints over, shouting as the boy's knees finally buckle. The knight catches him just in time. He's panicking, demanding to know where all this blood came from and what happened to the others. Klein just tells him to stop shouting and just hold him up. His legs are completely shot, and he hasn't got an ounce of strength left. He drops the truth like a stone. He killed Dalton because the man tried to kill him first. The scene shifts to the Grand Assembly Hall of the Rhineland, where the air is thick with the smell of old paper and political tension. A hand slams down on the table, with enough force to rattle the entire room. Count Delkin Conwell is in the middle of a performative meltdown, demanding to know how his son could be accused of such a heinous crime. He shouts to the entire hall, painting Dalton as a man defined by honor and loyalty. To him, it's an insult to his family's name to even suggest that his son was an assassin. Duke Heinkel Rhineland looks on from his high seat, completely unimpressed by the theatrics. He notes that despite the long interrogation, Klein's story hasn't changed once. He points out that they should be focused on finding the truth of the matter immediately. He holds up a report for the council to see, and the evidence isn't looking good for the Conwells. There's a direct record of 20 mercenaries being dispatched from Delkin's own estate right when the two disappeared. Heinkel stares the count down. It's becoming very clear that Dalton was indeed up to something that day. Delkin's face pales as he internally curses his idiots for being sloppy enough to leave a paper trail. The nobles in the stands start whispering to each other, not quite buying the logic. They've all seen Dalton's skill with a sword. How could a boy who has never held a blade and has 0 mana manage to kill him? Delkin realizes he's losing the room. If the truth about the assassination attempt gets out, his career and his house are finished. He swallows hard and decides to shift the focus, hopping to play on the council's biases. He starts digging into Klein's past, bringing up the old, bizarre rumors that followed his late mother, Claire, until her death. He mocks the boy for claiming to be the legendary Lord Archman since he was a small child. Heinkel's jaw sets as the count crosses a line. Delkin goes on the offensive, screaming that a talentless weakling like Klein must have hired someone else to kill Dalton. He calls the whole situation disgusting, playing the victim until a cold, calm voice cuts right through his shouting. Delkin freezes. That voice sounded a lot closer and a lot more dangerous than he expected. Klein walks into the center of the hall, looking perfectly composed in his suit. He's heard enough of the count's nonsense. He stares Delkin down and repeats the truth. The count hired mercenaries to kill him, and he simply defended himself. He even mentions Priest Garrison's arrival as the turning point when mysterious figures turn the guards into undead. Delkin loses it completely, screaming at the top of his lungs that the boy is lying. Klein just lets out a chilling smirk, his eyes flashing with a sharp, predatory light. He leans in and whispers that while the self-defense part was true, the part about him being Archman, that was true as well. Delkin Conwell grinds his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. He's cornered and he knows it. Klein watches him with a cold, predatory gaze. He made a vow after killing Dalton. He would restore this family with his own hands and never let it be defiled again. His focus is absolute. The collateral branch families who dared to mess with him will be the first to fall. A sudden knock at the doors interrupts the silence of the hall. A woman's voice calls out, casually apologizing for her late arrival. Leia Fallwyvern, commander of the Blue Holy Spear Knights, makes her entrance with an air of effortless authority. She strides past the guards, her presence commanding everyone's attention. Klein recognizes her immediately. She was at the swordsmanship demonstration, and her presence here is an unexpected variable he hasn't accounted for. The nobles whisper her name, wondering why the Fallwyvern family would interfere in a private Rhineland matter. Heinkel speaks up, revealing that he's the one who gave her permission to attend. Heinkel explains that Dalton had previously carried out missions under her knight order, giving her a vested interest in the investigation. Leia stops and looks around, her sharp amber eyes scanning the room as someone helps her off with her coat. In her eyes, she has every right to be here. Her gaze is piercing, missing nothing as she settles into the environment. She makes direct eye contact with Klein, her lips curling into a subtle, unreadable expression. Her hand waves dismissively as she addresses the room. She makes a sudden, bold request. She wants to speak with young Master Klein in private. Klein can only stare back, caught off guard by the demand. Klein's mind races, trying to figure out her angle. Why him? Heinkel considers the request for a moment before giving his consent. The Duke tells Klein to go with her, but keep it brief. Klein can only offer a short, hesitant acknowledgement as the weight of the situation sinks in. He finds the whole thing incredibly annoying. Why do knights always have to be so dramatic and cryptic? Then he stops, a new thought occurring to him. This could actually be an opportunity if he plays his cards right. There are only 3 reasons a woman like her would want to speak with a weakling like him. It's either verification, suspicion, or a direct test. He tells Heinkel he understands and starts to follow her out. He follows her through the doorway, his silhouette dark against the light of the hallway. Whatever her goal is, he has no intention of running away. If she thinks she can use him, she's mistaken. He'll be the one using her to further his own goals, no matter who she is. The sharp click of a high-heeled boot echoes in the corridor as Leia stops walking. She stands there silently for a moment, the tension between them growing with every passing second. She calls out to him, her voice casual but holding an underlying edge. Suddenly, she's in his personal space, leaning in close with a question that catches him completely off guard. She asks if she can touch him. Klein stares at her, sweat breaking out as he wonders if she's actually serious. Her proximity is overwhelming. Leia Wren Fallwyvern isn't just any noblewoman. She's a high-ranking member of one of the continent's 3 great duchies, standing on equal footing with the Rhineland house. She's a master of spearmanship and the knight commander of the Blue Sacred Spear Knights, a role that commands respect across the land. Her official record is a testament to her lethal skills and unwavering courage in the face of danger. She has stood her ground against hordes of monstrous orcs, never flinching even as their axes swung toward her. In the heat of battle, her eyes take on a sharp, glowing intensity as she tracks every movement of her enemies. With a single, lightning-fast thrust of her spear, she can cut down multiple foes before they even realize she's moved. During a major monster suppression operation in the Western Forest, she led a search for civilian safety with relentless efficiency. In that single operation, she exterminated several high-ranking monsters single-handedly, leaving nothing but carnage in her wake. She did it all alone, proving that she's a force of nature that few can even hope to match. She looks back at the trail of destruction she left behind, her expression cold and detached. To her, this is just part of the job. Back in the present, she tells Klein to stop daydreaming and follow her. She's not one for patience. She warns him not to act too friendly, reminding him that they aren't even real family. Klein follows her, wondering exactly what she means by that. He remembers what Heinkel told him about the family tree. Leia is technically his cousin, the daughter of Duke Fallwyvern's second wife. But since she's the daughter of the first wife, and he's from a different line, they don't share a single drop of blood. Biologically, they are complete strangers. She stops again and turns to him, her voice dropping to a low, intimate tone. She says she's just acting out of personal curiosity. Before he can even respond, she lunges forward and grabs the front of his shirt. Klein lets out a startled shout as he's pulled toward her. She leans in close, her face just inches from his, and drops that bizarre request to touch him. The shock of it leaves him completely paralyzed. The scene pulls back to show them alone on the balcony. Klein's mind is spinning. Why would she ask something like that so suddenly? Leia Fallwyvern grabs Klein's wrist with a firm, practiced grip that catches him by surprise. She demands to see his hand, her amber eyes locking onto his with an intensity that brooks no refusal. She turns his palm over, examining the skin with clinical precision under the fatting light. She notes the soft, smooth texture, finding it suspicious that there isn't a single scar or blister on the hand of a boy who supposedly fought off 20 men. Klein stands frozen, sweat beading on his forehead, as he wonders why on earth she is feeling up his hand in such a public place. His expression is one of pure, unadulterated bewilderment at her strange behavior. Leia continues her inspection, explaining that while some master swordsmen have soft hands, specific areas still harden from the pressure of the hilt. She is looking for the subtle physical structural changes that only come from years of elite training. Her thumb and forefinger squeeze the flesh under his index finger and thumb, testing the density of his tendons. She asserts that while a person can lie with their words, their body's physical development will always tell the truth. She leans in dangerously close, her face just inches from his in the warm glow of the balcony. With a piercing gaze, she asks him point-blank if he has ever even held a sword in his life. The proximity is suffocating as she repeats her observation, her voice low and steady. She declares that just looking at his hands, there is absolutely no trace of him ever wielding a weapon of war. Her voice drops further as she questions how someone with such pristine hands could have defeated an official knight like Dalton. She starts to voice a deeper, more dangerous suspicion, her eyes narrowing into slits. She suggests that he might have used some other, hidden power to achieve such a feat. In the background of her thoughts, the terrifying visage of a skeleton with glowing red eyes looms, mirroring her growing suspicion of necromancy. Klein suddenly shoves her away, cutting short her probing gaze. That abrupt movement shatters the tension as he tries to put some distance between them. He quickly masks his shock with a defiant smirk, trying to laugh off her pointed accusation. He mockingly asks if she's going to go as far as to call him Archmond, using the name as a shield. Internally, he is on high alert, realizing that this woman's instincts make her incredibly dangerous to his secret. He realizes that her questions aren't just simple curiosity, they are a calculated test. He watches her eyes, seeing that she is carefully gauging his every micro-expression to find a crack in his armor. He realizes that she isn't just waiting for an answer, but waiting for him to slip up. Klein knows that any further silence or hesitation will be taken as a direct admission of guilt. He decides the only way to survive this encounter is to act with even more confidence than his opponent. He narrows his eyes and adopts a cocky, arrogant attitude to throw her off the scent. He prepares to give her a bold answer that leans into the absurdity of her suspicion. He lets out a mocking laugh, asking her what she would do if he actually were the legendary Archmond. His grin is sharp, designed to make her feel that the very question is ridiculous. Leia isn't intimidated at all, scoffing at the idea with a dismissive wave of her hand. She tells him that the notion of a brat, like him being the great Archmond, is completely impossible. The word brat hits Klein with unexpected force, leaving him stunned and momentarily speechless. His carefully constructed facade of a powerful necromancer crumbles under the weight of the petty insult. He stares at her with wide eyes and his mouth hanging open in total disbelief. The transition from feared sorcerer to belittled child is a shock he wasn't prepared for. He begins to tremble with indignation, asking her if she really meant to use such a demeaning word. Leia remains perfectly calm, casually offering to repeat the insult if he didn't quite catch it the first time. She continues her verbal assault, criticizing his small stature, bad proportions, and complete lack of presence. She concludes that, in a word, he is simply nothing more than a brat. The phrase, "a little brat," echoes in the air, punctuating the total destruction of his pride. Klein looks as though his very soul has been wounded by her blunt, insulting assessment. Klein slumps over in total defeat, suffering from the severe internal damage her words have caused his ego. Leia dismisses him as neither a swordsman nor a legendary figure of power. As she turns to walk away, she offers a final, provocative challenge over her shoulder. She tells him that if someone as weak as him could truly defeat a knight, she would give him her lips as a reward. Klein remains in a state of absolute shock, his brain struggling to process the sudden, bizarre shift in the conversation. He can only stare at her retreating back with a blank expression. He wonders what possible use such a reward would be, his rationality completely derailed by the encounter. A caption notes that he is currently unable to think clearly due to the mental trauma. He stands there confused, wondering if her behavior was some sort of complex political move or just simple bribery. Leia calls back to him, telling him they need to head back inside before they are late. Leia walks across the balcony, her silhouette framed by the golden-orange hues of the setting sun. The wind catches her hair as she moves with the grace of a seasoned knight. Her expression becomes serious and introspective as she looks away from him. She thinks to herself that the real, terrifying Archmond would never have been anything like this boy. The scene shifts to their feet walking across the threshold as they re-enter the main hall. An attendant's voice rings out, announcing that young Master Klein and Lady Leia are now entering the assembly. Looking around the grand hall, Archmond admits to himself that he's been a bit too relaxed. He's currently stuck in the body of Klein, the nuisance, second son who's been away with the Holy Order for 7 years. Count Delkin Conwell looks like he's about to burst a vein. He knows the council won't believe Klein's claim of self-defense against his son Dalton, and he's counting on that lack of trust. Duke Heinkel Rhineland leans back, his expression unreadable as he asks what the two of them discussed. The weight of his authority hangs heavy over the room. Leia Fallwyvern watches with narrowed eyes as a blade is drawn from its sheath. The metallic ring of the sword echoes through the silent chamber. Klein slams the sword into the floor with a deafening crack. The sudden display of aggression catches everyone off guard. The shock on the faces of the assembly is immediate. Both the Duke and the Knight Commander look like they can't believe the weak, young master just did that. Klein points the blade directly at the Count, calling him out by name. He's done talking, now he's going to prove his worth his own way. He tells Delkin Conwell that they should settle this like men, according to the ancient laws of the North. The room goes still as they realize where this is heading. Klein's eyes are cold and unwavering as he issues the challenge. He wants to face the Count in a trial by combat. The assembly erupts into a flurry of panicked whispers. Nobody expected the monoless boy to invoke such a brutal tradition. A trial by combat is a relic of the past, a judicial method used when a verdict is impossible to reach through words alone. In this duel, there are no rules and no restricted techniques. Whoever is left standing determines the truth of the matter. Basically, it's a legal fight to the death where the winner takes all. The primitive nature of it is exactly why it's so rarely used these days. Delkin is trembling, stuttering out his confusion at the sudden turn of events. Klein just stares him down, unfazed by the older man's shock. Klein lists the Count's crimes, framing him despite evidence and insulting his late mother, Claire. He's using the family's honor as the perfect excuse to force this fight. Internally, he knows only half of his outrage is genuine. He's playing a part, even if he doesn't actually care about the woman he's defending. He looks at the portrait of Claire, his mother in this second life. To the great Archmond, she's just a stranger, and he feels no real attachment to her. The Count tries to buy some time, but Klein isn't having it. He sheathes his sword with a sharp click and tells the man to hurry up and make a choice. Up in the balconies, the nobles are practically buzzing with excitement. It's been ages since they've seen a real trial by combat, and they're eager for the spectacle. Duke Heinkel looks toward the Count with a stern gaze. Since the tradition was passed down by the first generation, he says they can't simply ignore it. The Duke officially guarantees that the outcome of this duel will be final. His word is law, and now there's no backing out. By agreeing to the duel, all the evidence presented so far becomes useless. Delkin realizes that if he wins, all his lies become the official truth. The Count sees this as his golden ticket. He mockingly asks if the monoless young master will really be all right in a fight. He's already planning to send a powerful knight in his place. In his mind, he's already won, and he can't wait to see the brat dead. Klein just gives him a dark smirk. He tells the Count he can just sit back and watch, exactly like how he watched his son get butchered. The Count formally accepts the challenge. The duel is set for 4 days from now, and the tension in the room is at a boiling point. Klein knows he's gambling, but it's a calculated risk. He didn't raise the stakes like this for no reason. This is just the beginning of his plan. He glances at Leia as he thinks about using the Count as a stepping stone. He's going to show all the branch families exactly who he really is. The estate stands quiet under the night sky, but inside, things are anything but peaceful. Klein's ultimate goal is a complete overhaul of the Rhineland family. The silence of the hallway is shattered by a loud shout. Someone is very, very unhappy with Klein's decision. Delane is packing frantically, screaming at his brother for being out of his mind. He's terrified that Klein is going to get himself killed. Klein just sits back on the sofa, looking bored. He sighs as he tells Delane he's already heard this a dozen times. Delane is shocked that their father actually gave his permission for this madness. He looks like he's at his wit's end trying to understand it. He offers to step in as Klein's champion, since the rules allow for one. But Klein cuts him off immediately, telling him it's not needed. Delane points to their father and himself as the reason the Rhineland family rules the North. He doesn't think Klein is ready to carry that burden yet. Klein stands up, his expression hardening. He tells his brother to wake up and asks why on earth he would let someone else fight his battles. He explains that letting Delane fight would just give their enemies a legal way to kill the true heir of Rhineland. He's not going to be anyone's puppet. Klein knows it's frustrating for Delane, but this fight is a necessity. It's the only way he can truly change his reputation and gain some respect. Delane clenches his fist, the worry clear on his face. Klein stands firm, telling his brother that he has absolutely no reason to yield. Delane's mind drifts back to the day Klein was born. He remembers how excited he was to finally have a little brother. He remembers the tiny baby reaching out, a small and fragile life that he vowed to protect from that very moment. Looking at the infant Klein, a young Delane was struck with wonder. To him, his little brother looked just like an angel. Delane tells Klein that their different mothers don't change the fact that they're brothers. He's clearly distressed that Klein is risking his life in a trial by combat after only just returning home. Delane suddenly grabs Klein, his hands trembling as he pulls his brother close. The sudden movement leaves Klein looking completely bewildered by the unexpected emotional outburst. A single tear tracks down Delane's face as he begs Klein to listen to him. He can't stand the thought of losing the brother he waited 7 long years to see again. Klein watches the tear fall, his expression turning from shock to genuine confusion. He didn't expect this level of emotional attachment from the brother his new body inherited. The heavy atmosphere is broken as the doors swing open and a messenger steps into the room. Delane lets go, trying to compose himself as the guard speaks up. The messenger informs them that Count Conwell has already chosen his champion for the duel. He looks tense, clearly aware that the news he's bringing is a serious threat. Klein casually asks who the opponent is, looking almost entertained by the update. Delane, on the other hand, looks like he's already expecting the worst. The messenger reveals the name, Randall. He's an excommunicated knight from the Empire who made a bloody name for himself on the battlefield before being cast out. The scene shifts away from the estate to a local tavern, where the wooden doors swing open with an ominous creak. Inside, a mounted lion's head hangs on the stone wall, its jaw frozen in a silent roar above the carnage below. Dark red liquid is poured into a wooden bucket, splashing against the sides. It's a far cry from the refined wine glasses of the Rhineland manor. In the middle of the room sits Randall, a mountain of a man surrounded by the bodies of those he slaughtered. The messenger describes him as a man driven by uncontrollable bloodlust. Randall tilts his head back, chugging the red liquid straight from the bucket with messy, guttural gulps. He looks less like a knight and more like a wild animal. With blood dripping from his chin, Randall lets out a menacing grin. He's looking forward to the duel, especially the part where he gets to hear the screams of a little boy. Back at the manor, Klein remains calm, his silver eyes reflecting a cold determination. He knows exactly what kind of monster is waiting for him in the arena.